Hi, I'm Tom Phillips. Let's talk about self-sabotage. Have you ever set a goal for yourself? You feel motivated, you've got a plan in place, you're ready to go, and then you find yourself doing the exact opposite of what you should be doing to succeed. Maybe you procrastinate, you avoid having a conversation that you know will move things forward, or you tell yourself that you're not ready, not good enough, you are not worthy of success because you're not the kind of person who succeeds at things like this in life. This is self-sabotage, and it's a vicious circle when it's combined with anxiety. We get anxious about the things that we want to achieve in life, but then we start self-sabotaging every time we try to achieve those things, and so we get more anxious because we're self-sabotaging. And a lot of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing it. In this video, I'm going to unpack exactly what self-sabotage is, what causes it, how it shows up, and I'm going to give you some powerful tips on how to break the cycle of self-sabotage and move forward with less fear, less anxiety, and more clarity in your life. Self-sabotage refers to thought processes, emotions, and behaviors that deliberately, but often unconsciously, undermine our own goals and our own well-being. Psychology today defines it as intentional action or inaction that undermines people's progress and prevents them from achieving their goals. Common examples of self-sabotage include procrastination, negative self-talk, downplaying our achievements, avoiding opportunities, and using distractions or substances to procrastinate and numb the anxiety that we feel as a result of the self-sabotage that we are putting ourselves through. And in the context of anxiety, self-sabotage often acts like a protective mechanism. We tell ourselves stories like, I'll fail anyway, so why should I even try? And if I don't go all in, then at least I have an excuse. So it's a way of managing fear, but it does so in a way that undermines the progress we want to make in life. Why would anybody do this knowingly, get in their own way? The truth is, we usually don't know that we're doing it. Self-sabotage is a subconscious process. On the surface, we set goals, we make plans, but beneath that, there are deeper emotional barriers or deeper emotional currents we have developed in order to protect ourselves. So these protective strategies will actually steer behavior in the opposite direction of what it is we want to achieve. Some of the most common causes of self-sabotage include low self-esteem and negative core beliefs. Many people carry implicit beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve success, or I'm bound to fail if I try. These beliefs are like invisible handbrakes. Any forward momentum we try to make threatens the identity that we've created and the mindset that says, we're not good enough, we can't achieve things like this. So those limiting beliefs become very powerful at a subconscious level. Sometimes a fear of failure is what stops us from moving forward. Failure often threatens self-worth. So for many people, it's less painful to avoid trying than to risk trying and failing. Self-sabotage gives us a reason for not succeeding, rather than confronting the possibility that we tried and it wasn't good enough. There's also the opposite of this, which is a fear of success. When we're successful, that brings higher expectations. It brings with it more visibility because people look at us to see how we've been successful. And sometimes that causes jealousy from others. And for some people, success feels unsafe, especially if they've experienced criticism or betrayal or some kind of loss after they've achieved things in the past. Many of us have internal conflicts. So there's a clash between our conscious goals, such as I want to get fit or I want to grow my business, and our subconscious needs, which may be things like I want comfort, I want safety, I want to avoid being criticized, or I want to avoid being judged. And the subconscious wins because its basic role is to keep us safe and to help with survival. Some of us suffer from perfectionism and all or nothing thinking when it comes to self-sabotage. So perfectionism creates unrealistic standards that are impossible to meet, and that leads to procrastination or paralysis analysis, and we give up altogether. These are classic self-sabotage patterns. Past trauma and learned experiences will again help us develop protective patterns that make us self-sabotage, but don't help us move forward. If you grew up in an unpredictable, a critical, or an emotionally unsafe environment, you will have learned coping mechanisms like people-pleasing or avoidance or self-criticism that once kept you safe, but now no longer serve you as an adult when trying to achieve your goals in life. We have something called identity and congruence. So if the goal doesn't quite align with your internal self-image, self-sabotage will follow. For example, you may be the kind of person who sees themselves as anxious or an underachiever. And so when you try to achieve goals or you try to achieve progress and success in life, your subconscious starts to undermine that because it's not aligned with who you believe you are, even though you're not actually that person. So that goal is not aligned with your identity. And when we add anxiety into all of this, it supercharges self-sabotage. It exaggerates the perceived risks. It strengthens our urges to avoid taking risks to be successful. And it distorts the beliefs that we have about ourselves in the moment as we try to achieve the things that we want to achieve. So this is why self-sabotage is really intense when people try to make meaningful change in their lives, because their nervous system, their subconscious steps in and stops them from putting themselves in a situation that it perceives as being a risk. There are many things that cause self-sabotage, such as low self-esteem and negative beliefs, fear and anxiety, such as a fear of failure or a fear of success, internal conflict between our subconscious and our conscious minds, and past trauma and perfectionism. One of the biggest causes of self-sabotage that I see in my clients is a limiting belief that says, I'm not worthy. So it may be, I'm not worthy of being loved, or I'm not worthy of being successful in my career or in my business. All of these causes are magnified by anxiety. For people who suffer with anxiety, self-sabotage is a daily problem that they face throughout most of their lives until they do something about it. That anxiety amplifies the perceived risks, strengthens the avoidance behavior, and it reinforces the negative beliefs that go alongside self-sabotage. Self-sabotage doesn't always look dramatic. In fact, it's usually subtle, it's easy to rationalize, and it shows up as things like procrastination. So we choose short-term comfort over long-term gain, which may involve a certain amount of discomfort because change is an uncomfortable process, but it's worth it if you're trying to achieve certain things in life. It may show up as things like perfectionism. So we are waiting for that perfect moment or the perfect conditions to make a change. And that moment and those conditions never arrive. Overthinking is often a sign of self-sabotage. We are endlessly thinking about doing something, maybe even preparing, but not taking action. Negative self-talk is a huge problem with self-sabotage. That internal conflict tells us that we're not good enough. That negative self-talk, that little voice in our head that never, ever goes away. Some people will overwork as a sign of their self-sabotage. They keep busy to avoid uncomfortable situations or experiencing uncomfortable emotions. Quite often we will self-sabotage relationships because we feel that we're unworthy of being loved. And so we cause arguments that destroy relationships that were actually really, really good for us. And although these patterns feel protective at a conscious level, they're actually really destructive. They will lead to blocked progress and missed opportunities in work. So you are late on delivering a project, you miss goals, you stay in the preparation and planning phase of trying to deliver something without actually crossing into the threshold of action. So you miss out on opportunities for advancement within your career or actually promotions throughout your career. We end up with self-fulfilling prophecies. When we sabotage efforts, we prove ourselves right. We reinforce the belief that we're not good enough. We say to ourselves, yep, I knew I'd mess it up, so why should I try again in the future to achieve things, to be successful? All of this leads to increased anxiety, shame, and in some cases, depression. The emotional fallout of self-sabotage often includes guilt, frustration, low mood, and increased anxiety. Over time, if it goes on long enough, that will contribute towards depression or chronic stress and anxiety. It will definitely lead to damaged relationships. So when we self-sabotage in relationships because we feel like we're not worthy of the relationship, we damage the trust that exists within those relationships, or we avoid showing our vulnerability, and we avoid following through on the things that we said we're going to do for our partners. So again, we further erode the trust that needs to exist in any relationship. Self-sabotage will definitely lead to a reduction in self-efficacy. The more we self-sabotage, the more we train our brains to expect failure. And then we start to doubt our abilities even further. So we hesitate to set goals, no matter how big or small. And we overall just lower our expectations of ourselves and what we're capable of. And all of this will lead to physical and mental health implications. So chronic anxiety, stress, overthinking keep our bodies in a heightened state of arousal or fight or flight that you've probably heard about. This can lead to sleep disruptions, immune system problems, muscular problems or headaches, and gastrointestinal or stomach problems. These cycles ultimately become part of who we are unless we do something about it. Self-sabotage becomes self-perpetuating. The anxiety fuels the sabotage, and the sabotage fuels the anxiety. Over time, these loops tighten and become worse, and they are unlikely to be interrupted until we become aware of it and we take some intentional action to reduce or eliminate the self-sabotage that we have. The good news is there are some simple strategies or tips that we can put into place to deal with self-sabotage, and you can do these starting from today once you've finished watching this video. The first thing we need to do is raise our awareness of when we are actually self-sabotaging. We need to actually shine a light on what's happening, because self-sabotage kind of lives in the shadows. We're usually not aware we're doing it most of the time. So start by keeping a track of your triggers. Keep a daily log. That'll definitely help, of moments when you procrastinated, when you were self-critical, when you avoided doing something important, when you caused an argument in a relationship that didn't need to happen. When you keep that log, notice what was happening at the time. What were you thinking and what were you feeling at that time? Just note it all down. And then what we can start to do is separate our identity from the act of self-sabotaging. So when we become aware of how and when and where we are self-sabotaging, we can begin to label that, and we can say to ourselves, I'm aware of the fact that I'm self-sabotaging right now. Once we're aware of when, how, and where we're self-sabotaging, we can start to separate our identity from that of a self-saboteur. When you catch yourself in the act of self-sabotage, say to yourself, I'm aware of the fact that I am self-sabotaging right now. And this simple acknowledgement creates psychological distance and disassociates you as a person from the act of self-sabotage. For example, if you notice that you are procrastinating over reporting work, instead of saying, I'm a failure because I can't complete this report, say to yourself, I'm aware that I'm putting off completing this report right now. And then you can start to look at why you're putting off that report and take some of the actions that I'll mention in a minute that will help you to get going. We can then check in with ourselves at the end of every day and ask yourself, where did I self-sabotage today? What was I avoiding doing? What were the situation? What were the people that were involved? How was I thinking? How was I feeling? More importantly, what could I do tomorrow if the same triggers occur? How could I avoid self-sabotaging in a similar situation with similar people? And then we begin to build small trust actions. These are small actions that will start to move us forward out of self-sabotage. Having big goals is great. They become very inspirational, but they're the perfect playground for self-sabotage to show up. So shrink the targets, break the projects down into smaller tasks. Give yourselves tiny concrete things that you know you can deliver on. For example, you might have a big project that you're looking at, but instead of treating it as a whole project, just work on it for 10 minutes, write the first page, do the first slide, or make the first call to a colleague involved in the project. Each of these small actions builds your trust bank, and you begin to prove to yourself that you can make progress even in small steps, and each small step leads to a bigger step. Another really good idea is to get some external accountability. So get someone to help you stay on target, whether it's personal or a professional goal. This could be a professional coach, or maybe a PT in a gym if fitness is one of your goals. It could be a peer in work. But when we ask these people to become accountability partners, we are making our external commitments, and it's harder to break commitments once we've told other people about them and we've asked them to hold us to account, because we know that person is going to be checking in. Finally, remind yourself that Rome wasn't built in a day. So the small steps that you take, the small actions that you take will have a compound effect over time, and you will progress towards your goal. You don't have to do everything right now or right away. Achieving those small steps will reinforce your belief that you can be successful when you break things down and you begin to break those self-sabotage loops. Remember, when you start to take any or all of these actions, you reframe your fears, you regulate your emotions, you kill the negative self-talk, and self-sabotage starts to lose its grip on you. You may still hear it whispering, but it's no longer shouting and dictating your life. If you like this video, check out my video on automatic negative thoughts, because they're a part of self-sabotage. I'm here when you want to speak to me. Remember, you are enough.